Welcome, welcome to the last episode of 2025 for the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shauna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And yeah, it's quite unbelievable that we are at
Hmm.
the December mark. We usually don't record like exactly 52 episodes anyway, because we take a
Right,
break,
right.
y'all, because we talk to y'all every week for the majority of the year. But it still went by fast, Lisa. I mean, maybe it's just because we've had so much to choose from. Like the people that are much more polished and experts at this than we are, that do like two, three, four episodes a week. I'm like, yeah, if
Mm,
you're doing current events this year, you've got plenty to talk about. You should literally
yeah,
not run
yeah.
out of anything to talk about. And so for us, trying to cram it all into 50 or so episodes, yeah, it's gone by kind of fast to me.
Yeah, I mean that's why we went from three phases to two phases, right? Because we weren't getting deep enough and some
Yes.
of some of or many of the issues we wanted to talk about required a little bit more depth, although I
Right.
still feel like there's more. There's deeper that
Right.
we could go, right? So,
Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. For sure. So this is going to be our last episode for 2025, and then we'll be back on January 6th with new episodes. Um, oh, Lisa, that doesn't feel good. January 6th just doesn't ever feel good anymore, right?
No,
But
no, it
anyway,
doesn't.
sorry to all the people that may have birthdays or anniversaries on January 6th, but here in the US, yeah, that's an
Yeah.
interesting day. But we will be back then on January 6th with new episodes for the year. And just given that we've had so much to happen this year, Lisa, the first year of every presidential term, for those podcasts that have long tenures and they have seen this year more
Hmm.
than once, I don't know how you do it. That's all I know. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
let's get into our last word 25.
Okay, so it felt perfect actually that very recently University Press released their word of the year. I'm sure there will be other words of the year by various entities, as we do finally wrap up the end of December, but their word of the year is rage bait. And basically, what it means, or how they're describing it, is that it's online content deliberately designed to elicit anger or outrage by being frustrating, provocative, or offensive, typically posted in order to increase traffic to or engagement with a particular web page or social media account. And so, the reason, presumably, why this is the word, or guess it's kind of a words, right, of the year is that 2025, I think, has just seen a massive increase in the ways in which people are engaging in really dangerous and harmful ways online. And I didn't know this, but I was reading an NPR piece about it, and I'll include the link in the show notes. But apparently, Jennifer Lawrence, she recently revealed that she has a secret TikTok account where she just is it's an anonymous account, some other random name, I don't know that, where she just has it to get into fights with strangers online. And so Oxford calls this rage bait the internet's most effective hook, intended to stimulate anger. I mean, and this is actually funny, right? Because it's coming on the heels of X's change in their location information, where a lot of these angry, what I would call rage baiting accounts were identified as being in foreign countries and not actually located in the United States, right? So they're not even real people. And I think that was really interesting. So I'm kind of curious to go to Jennifer Lawrence's secret TikTok to see what she's doing and what she's getting into. But she's at, I mean, I don't know, Shauna, if you know people that have aliases, they have social media accounts just to kind of scratch that itch of wanting to get into it with someone in an anonymous way.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who it is, but I know for sure there is at least one NBA player that I heard of that has one.
Mm,
was interviewed about it and was confronted about it and said, "Hey, do is this a myth or is this for real? Like, do you really have one?" And he was like, "Yep, absolutely. I want to get into it with people. I don't want to mess with my contractual obligations through my official account, etc. But I certainly
Right.
do." So I was like, "Oh, that's interesting," because I can also imagine being on the receiving end of a lot of conversations, especially when it's targeted towards you. But if it's a topic in general that you are frustrated by, angered by, I think that's very interesting, and I don't judge. I don't judge. I won't judge it. I won't judge it.
I mean, it's funny, right? Because part of the
Yeah.
deterioration of our sense of community and our willingness to give people the benefit of the doubt or find common ground
Mhm.
has been, grossly um, accelerated by the internet and the fact that you can
That's
attack
right.
people anonymously. And there's several podcasters um, and other people who, are in the spotlight who have said that they get all this, really hateful vitriol coming across them on the internet, and
Hmm.
they've actually like confronted people, and then the people are like,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't really mean that, I'm sorry. But when you
Oh
don't,
yeah.
when you
Oh yeah.
so it's really I don't know, like I get it. I get why rage bait is a thing. Like I understand what it kind of appeals to, like a base human emotion, but I just feel like
Mhm.
things are going to get a lot worse in 26 if this keeps going the way it is.
Mhm. Well, but you're bringing up a good point. I know this is just the word of the week, and we've got much more to cover. But I do think it's very interesting. It's called keyboard courage, Lisa. When people will
Oh, I like
say
that.
things, um, whether it's via social media or another way, even via just regular email, where people have much more courage than they would in person. And so what gets very interesting is when people don't get by. They
Mm,
don't get by with what they've said and they're being confronted to their face about it, and then all of a sudden they back off because they wrote it never considering that they would ever
yep.
be personally confronted by it.
Yep.
And so with that, you get this courage of hiding behind these keyboards where you wouldn't ever say this to an individual directly. Now, some
Hmm.
of us have policy that if we're going to type it, we're going to say it. We're cool with that.
Right. Right.
But a lot of people do not. And so that's when things get interesting is the accountability factor of it. If you put it out there thinking that you're never going to be held accountable for it, then you get a little bit loose. You get a little more courage. Once you're held accountable, people back off, never imagining that moment would ever occur.
Right. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, but anyway, so yes, I'm loving the rage bait point because it really does give us another lens to think clearly about, okay,
Hmm.
was this intentionally written to get me
Right.
riled up and now I can intentionally step aside, move around it, ignore it,
Yep.
or choose to engage. Whatever you choose to do, just do it with the awareness. Let's put it that way.
Yes. That's a great point. Do it with the awareness. I love it.
Just do it with the awareness. So, oh, well, let me also to slide us into a phase update. We rarely do this, y'all, but stuff happens where it's happening so quickly that frankly, we kind of shared with you all about the University of Virginia in a previous episode, knowing that there was going to be an upcoming meeting. Well, that meeting actually happened 2 days before this recording. And so let me give you just a couple of updates here. If you recall, there was a lot going on about President Emeritus Jim Ryan's resignation under federal pressure back in June. And of course, since that resignation to today, as we're recording, there's been a lot that's happened, including a brand new governor that's been elected in the state of Virginia. There's been the stepping down of one rector of the Board of Visitors of UVA and the stepping up of that vice rector into her role. And there were a lot of folks that said, hold up, let's pump the brakes. We do not want to appoint a new president until we get clear on what happened with our previous president to give us
Hmm.
enough time to figure out. what our new governor would like, because in the state of Virginia, the governor appoints the BOV then appoints or searches for the president. So figuring out the governor, and then frankly, figuring out if you have quorum enough to even select a president, if you have enough quorum on the BOV. And so what has happened was that there were multiple votes of no confidence in the Board of Visitors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Faculty called for Rector Rachel Sheridan, who was the vice rector when all this went down and now is rector. Rachel Sheridan to step down, and also Vice Rector Porter Wilkinson also to resign as well. And on top of that, what I think is really interesting is that the protesters' voices were very clear with these meetings. I mean, they were holding signs outside of the meetings, asking for a pause in the presidential search. And let's be clear, our governor-elect, Abigail Spanberger, has also called of the presidential search because she is aware of these multiple votes of no confidence from faculty and
Mm-hmm.
students
Mm-hmm.
regarding the board. So all of that being said, what I appreciate about all of this is I know for certain previous episodes, we talked about the notion of resistance. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes resistance is most effective when there is delay, the slowing down
Right.
of
Right.
processes. And that's what we're seeing right here with the University of Virginia, the slowing down of processes. Now, that obviously doesn't guarantee the most ideal outcome, but at least it does not succumb to this air of urgency, which is bound to make more and more mistakes apparent. So, with
Yeah.
that, I'm still tracking, more meetings to come, and of course, a new governor to inaugurate. So, there we are with UVA.
All right. Well, thank you for that little update. I guess it's a hotbed of scandal and DEI pushback, which I appreciate. So go UVA students and faculty there. Good for you. Um,
Absolutely.
all right. So
Absolutely.
what we decided to do for this episode is a little bit of a year in review. So we're going to slide here into phase one, and it's going to be our only phase. And we are going to talk a little bit about the things that impacted us or that we felt were most salient in 2025. So let's get to it. Okay. So I have a question for you, Shauna. If you
Go
can
for it.
condense 12 months or 11 months, kind of, um, thinking back from January to now, what would you say for you were the biggest cultural flashpoints?
Oh, why would you do this to me, Lisa? Why? Why? Because there's so many. I mean, goodness, there's
Yeah.
so you could just kind of take a dart and just throw it at a dartboard
Mm-hmm.
and just pick one. But let me just share the ones that are very interesting. Some of them recent, some of them not. Some of them I would even consider evergreen, Lisa. When it comes to those cultural flashpoints, the first one that we've talked about multiple times from various entry points
Mm-hmm.
is, of course, AI and what that means for us. It kind of harkens back to a little bit of deja vu around when social media was starting up and we had several different camps thinking, "Oh, it's just a flash in the pan. It's a phase. No big deal.
Right,
It'll
right.
be here and gone soon." And then other people like, "No, this is a new language that we probably will never function without again." And then others that are like, "Oh, I'm tentatively walking from the shore into the deep." And here we are years later with a proliferation of social media
Yeah.
platforms, so forth, the critique of those very platforms, the obsolete platforms, those that are growing, changing. I think the same thing is happening with AI, especially in relation to how it duplicates, triplicates all the things that we critique around bias, discrimination,
Yep, yep.
um, human mistakes, and human errors in understanding the lived experiences of other human beings. So I think that is a huge kind of evergreen cultural flashpoint that's not going anywhere. So that's certainly one for me. Another that I would say too that would be a cultural flashpoint is, we're never going to unsee um, the all of the, I don't know if they're all limited to executive orders, but we're never going to unsee the trying of of the rule of law in this country either.
Right.
Because
Right.
how many times, Lisa, did we say this year past the inauguration that, yeah, of course we knew technically this could happen, but we didn't know that someone would
Mm-hmm.
actually do that shit, right? Like we
Right.
knew that
Right.
technically someone would try to push against, a two-term presidency and flirt with a third, but never in our lives would we think that bad judgment would go to terrible, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, I think that's also interesting too, is that pushing the limitations of the rule of law in every form and fashion this year. Um, and then I think another, which is more recent, but I think it reflects the lack of contextual awareness that some people have in the country, is the most recent choice for color of the year from Pantone, right?
Mm.
Interestingly enough, Lisa, this is that moment where you don't know whether it's the onion or whether it's real life. Like, is this a joke or is
Oh
this for
gosh.
real?
Many of
And
those
so
moments.
right. Pantone. I remember last year, I forget what color it was, Lisa. It might have been peach or something because you sent it to me and you said, oh, that would be a wonderful looking color on you with a scarf or something like that. I remember that.
Mm.
Fast forward, the color of the year is, look, they can fancy it all up however they want to with some freaking cloud dancer name. It is white, y'all. White. It's white. WHITE, white. White. It is white. And so when I saw it, I'm like, oh, this is interesting because, of course, it's controversial, right? I mean, I think Pantone started doing this 20 something years ago in order to make color and creativity relevant to
Mm-hmm.
more people. And at the same time, should we consider this rage bait, Lisa? Because you've got people like myself that do come from a DEI perspective that's thinking, oh, should we not consider this really oblivious to where we are in this country by naming such a color? Interesting. Like, I would never name a color that would be connected to race in any way, shape, or form, just given how volatile we are in this country right now. That's number one. But then number two, even artists are arguing about this choice because many artists are saying white is not indeed a color, but an absence of color. So even they disagree for their own reasons.
Mm.
And then what I found so interesting, like the irony just keeps layering on and on and on. When there was such an uproar about white being chosen as the color of the year, here comes a woman named Sky Kelly, ironic Sky Kelly, the president of Pantone, who happens to be a very clearly identifiable Black woman,
Mm.
to discuss the choice. And so, with that, interestingly enough, here's another conversation about, yeah, you can, but should you? Yeah, you could choose
Mm.
white, but should you choose white in this particular context? I think that's the carryover, not necessarily the color white or Pantone, but more so the flashpoint of, yeah, there are things that we can do, but in this situation, should we? Yeah, I can strike a match, but should I at a gas station? Hell no. And so I feel
Right.
like that has been a very common theme of you can, but should you? Um, that has been just a cultural issue across the board. But Lisa, I'm interested to hear about you. I know you're not going to get as riled up about Pantone as I did, but there's probably some other topics that are certainly cultural
No, I mean,
flashpoints.
I had seen, I think I just said to you before we recorded, I had seen a couple of social posts related to Pantone, but I had paid no mind to them, so I didn't know what it was. Um, and then like as soon as you told me that it was white, I was like, oh my gosh, that feels
Yeah,
very, to use your word, oblivious, right? Like we have a government that is actively trying to take the color out of the United States, shall we say.
that's
And
right.
then you have this white, as the color of the year just feels like, wow, yeah. So, well, for me, I think the big ones that stand out in terms of those cultural flashpoints, do you even remember on January 20th the pardon that was signed for the 1600 January 6th rioters,
Oh
including
yeah.
people that assaulted police officers, oath keepers, Proud Boys, etc. Like that just feels like 900 years ago, right? But I feel like
Right.
in terms of your point around the rule of law, well, I guess I would just extend that saying that the law is irrelevant to this administration in so
That's it.
much as there is a belief that the president is the law. So the president cannot do anything illegal. Therefore, like the rule of law is what he says it is. And that is obviously supported by the Supreme Court decision from last year, but the January 6th
Hmm.
pardons. And then it would be really immigration that includes or dovetails with military on the streets and the ongoing attack on trans rights. Here's something that I just read. So there was someone, assistant health and human services secretary. I think there are many assistant health and human services secretary, but it's in the Biden administration, a trans woman. She's an admiral. Anyway, so there's a hallway in HHS where all of the kind of leaders of HHS, they have their portraits and their names. Just recently, presumably RFK or someone in the Trump administration changed her name.
Removed
So
it.
they dead
Oh,
named her. So yeah, so
ridiculous.
it now doesn't say Admiral whatever whatever,
Yeah.
which is it says what her previous name was, and actually her name, her correct name is her legal name. So they've taken that
Right.
off and put a name on there that is not even actually her legal name, but they're doing it to spite her, right? And they've
Oh,
left the portrait up. So yeah, so that the trans rights piece I think has been a huge cultural flashpoint in terms of woke,
absolutely.
which to your point about Pantone, I'm sure the
Uh-huh.
rage baiting includes libtards, snowflake liberals. Why are you
Oh
freaking
yeah.
out over a color? Right? There's probably a
Oh
whole lot of
yeah.
that kind of rage baiting that's happening. So
Absolutely.
anyway,
Absolutely.
you're right that the list is long, and we could probably just have a phase simply on cultural flashpoints this year.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, but here's the thing though, because I know you and I both take language very seriously. And I feel like there's been a bunch of language shifts this year too,
Yeah.
though, in regard to what's useful language, what's not, what's flammable language, what's not. Where do you think some of the biggest language shifts have happened for this year, given what we do and how we do it and how we are grossly misunderstood, based off of sound bites of what we do versus the actual research, scholarship, even the science behind what we do? Language is real
Hmm.
sucky right now. I think that's part of the reason why we always do a word of the week, because it's like we're
Yeah.
trying to help in our very small way. But what might be some language shifts, Lisa?
Well, I think there's just an overarching restriction on free speech, right? So you
Ah,
get to
okay.
use language and like your language choices are acceptable as long as they are in line with this current administration's perspectives, right? So
Hmm.
that runs the
Hmm.
gamut. If you recall at the beginning of the
Yeah.
year, again, gosh, I don't even know what month it was, Shauna, but there was that big long list of words that was circulating that
Yeah.
you couldn't
Yep.
put in grant applications if you wanted to get funded. And
Mhm.
there were things like, in addition to transgender, there were things like woman, right?
I was going to say woman,
Yeah.
just basic woman was in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or like sex or even the word gender, right? And so
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
think that the language that has enabled communities that have often been rendered invisible in the United States that were beginning to
Hmm.
be more visible because there was language that was becoming more, popular in its usage, that's all been rolled back, right? So I think
Yeah.
the language
Yeah.
shift has then precipitated organizations, communities trying to find a way to continue to do the work without naming it as such, right? So maybe we're not
Yes.
DEI practitioners, but maybe we're like organizational behavior consultants or something, right? But essentially, we're still doing equity. We're still thinking about inclusion. Um, and then another thing I would say in a language shift is both related to just don't use these words, but also these
Hmm.
words, particularly in the civil rights context, mean something different. So, civil
That's
rights
right.
laws that prohibit racial discrimination that were well documented to be understood to mean don't discriminate on the basis of race because this is to protect primarily black people, right? But people of color have been reimagined to be a law that upholds color blindness, meaning they're laws that protect white people.
Right, right,
So
right, right.
that whole language shift has both led to an erasure of folks, but also we're now using statutory language that was designed to protect racial minorities in the United States. We're now using that to protect racial majorities in the United States,
Yes, 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 yes,
which
yes,
is
yes.
like the upside down, right? This is why I just constantly
Mhm.
feel like we're in the upside down. It's like, no, the Voting Rights Act prohibition on discriminating based on race and the 15th, 14th, 15th, sorry, 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were written with the
Uh-huh.
intention of protecting Black people and other communities of color, not white people, right?
There you go.
So, yeah.
The
So I
the
think
the
that
mythical reverse everything, reverse discrimination, reverse yeah, everything.
that's what I would say in terms of those kind of seismic language shifts and how the word belonging has been
Mm.
substituted, although in some cases that's even been outlawed, right? And I just can't, I have to say this again. DEI is not illegal. You can't make it illegal. It isn't illegal. There is not a statute. It's not a criminal statute saying you can't do DEI. So
That's right.
anyway.
That's right. That's right. No, but to that point though, I think that's why earlier in the year when it was kind of the DEI uh strategists and professionals kind of grouped together and created
Hmm.
community to try to figure out what in the world was going on when we had that first onslaught of executive orders.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
one of the things that Kimberly Crenshaw, who was the brilliant mind that came up with the language of intersectionality when it comes to identity, that was one of the first things that she mentioned was that DEI has an image problem
Mm,
encouraged us, and we did part of this on a podcast, where now let's attempt to continue to speak to the words of DEI and not the acronym, the stolen acronym of DEI.
yeah, yeah.
So, and, from someone like her that worked for over 30 plus years and knows how iterations of language have not necessarily helped or harmed, but they have been
Hmm.
hijacked in many ways. And so with that, just reminding us that DEI it's very similar to um Lisa, this is funny yet not funny because I know you and I both are pretty serious when it comes to our triathlon equipment, especially our bikes. Imagine, which I have seen this before in DC. Imagine you're riding along in your car with your friends and you see someone who clearly is not a triathlete, not in triathlete clothes, not in cycling shoes, and they are riding in street clothes on probably a $10,000 bike because it's been taken from someone. They don't even
Mm,
realize how valuable it is because they just think it's something to get you from A to B.
right.
And I feel like that when it comes to DEI is that media and people who have not spent their life's work in this field heard it and then assumed in short order that, oh, this just gets us from A to B. That just gets Black people hired. That just gets women hired. Oh, well, that just lowers a standard so that someone else can get through the door. When in actuality, Lisa, I haven't had a chance to look at the data points, but I'm sure you've heard of the most recent report that said, oh, by the way, DEI has not been helpful either for white men in higher
Yeah,
ed.
yep, yep.
So, given, and I don't want to speak too much on that because I haven't looked at the data points, so I can't really talk very intelligently on that report yet. But still, it demonstrates a great point around hijacking something that's extremely valuable and trying to apply it in short order in ways that it wasn't meant to be applied to our lives, especially here in the US. And so that to me is the language shift is I'm taking my shit back, Lisa. Okay, for all the
Hmm.
people that decided that they wanted to steal DEI and turn it into hiring black people and women, I'm taking my shit back because that's not what it means, and it's never been what it has meant. Um,
Right.
so that language shift is certainly huge, but we'll see. I mean, there are some organizations that are still doing great DEI work, some that have gotten a little squirmy.
Yeah,
Well, you
so
know
so
how that goes.
let's pick up that trail then. What about corporate accountability? Obviously,
Ugh,
many organizations have just blown over like a feather, but others
yeah.
have, as you just said, maintained their DEI commitment. So, what is your sense thinking back on the year about the state of corporate responsibility or corporate accountability when it comes to a lot of what we have experienced this year?
Well, so the last time I strolled around in a Target was January.
Hmm.
And part of that was because a couple things. Interestingly enough, dynamics that weren't working together. The one dynamic was Reverend Dr. Jamal Bryant led the charge with naming this boycott and staying away from Target due to a number of different things, but especially when it comes to pulling the rug out from under a number of different corporate initiatives that I know that I brought up on this podcast for years,
Hmm.
that they were
Yep.
doing well when it came to whether it's minority suppliers, vendors,
Hmm.
even its branding being so inclusive. So that was one thing that was coming up. But at the same time, within that same month or so, Tabitha Brown, who was an African American entrepreneur, is very much into the green and vegan lifestyle. She had just launched a line that would be exclusively on her website and at Target. And so I felt this catch 22 of, sure, I want to get away from Target, but now I need to be clear on how I can go directly to the source rather than using
Hmm.
Target to do so. All right, so fast forward, they've seen millions of dollars plummet. They've seen months and months and months on top of months of downturn in foot traffic. And let me tell you the irony in this, Lisa, which I wish I had the number, I can Google it. But again, they don't want to get the point. Target doesn't want to get the point. And so they've decided in almost every headline I've seen, it has been this constricting of resources by the American people, which, yeah, that is true. But at the same time, there is a lack of acknowledgement around
Hmm.
how they did some stuff that flew in the face of underrepresented folks that have been supporting them for years. And so there's been
Yeah.
no acknowledgement of that. And so the most recent report that I read talked about the millions of dollars that they are trying to pour back into the stores to make them more attractive to foot traffic. And I'm
Mm.
thinking to myself, stop putting the damn lipstick on the pig, okay?
Yeah.
Effed up. You effed up and you don't want to name how you effed
Of
up. And
course they don't.
to blame it on people not having as much disposable income, which, yes, that's true, but there have been years that the American people did not have a lot of disposable income and they still had foot traffic in your stores.
Yeah.
Still. So,
Yep.
given that they don't want to name a thing, and so I feel like Target is the last to take full responsibility for what they have done. And that's a shame. And I'll just keep my money in my pocket.
I don't know that there's been any that have taken responsibility for what they've done, right? Some of these, all these companies that have donated to the ballroom, the gilded ballroom,
Oh
and
my gosh.
have
Yes.
eliminated their DEI programs. I mean, the choice, yeah, the
Yep.
choice is you're choosing profit over what's right. And in Target's case, you lost profit too.
There
So
you
you
go.
lost profit, you lost your integrity, right?
Mhm.
How do you come back from that?
Yeah,
And when
absolutely.
you were talking, I was like, oh, we didn't even mention tariffs. We're talking about cultural flashpoints in the economy, so
That's
it's
a
just
good
another
one.
thing we
Yeah.
didn't think to mention. But I just, I don't feel like I know there's lists out there of organizations and big businesses that have stood up or haven't caved, and I think Costco is one of those, right? But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I feel like a lot of this has just fallen out of the news. We're heading into the holiday season. I certainly haven't shopped at Target since January either, and I'm not intending
No,
to do so. But
no.
the degree to which, with tightening of belts, what is that going to do? Are these companies that have made these amoral decisions, right? Are they just going to be kind of
Yeah.
ride the storm because people are tired now and they're like, oh, fuck it, I need to go to
Mhm.
Target, so I'm just going to go.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I don't know if they're going to fold, but I think what's really going to be interesting is to see like I'm trying to remember the name of the organization, but I know there's at least one organization that now is suing the president for their losses of tariffs. And so I think that's an
Oh,
interesting
yes, you're
counterpoint of
right.
resistance. I can't remember
Yeah,
the name of the
I
organization,
can't
but
remember
that's
either.
yeah, but that's another recent counterpoint that's happened too. So I'm like, oh, let's see how far that goes. Interesting. Um, but Lisa, again, that goes with, I think that's a good example of resistance and resilience. I feel like
Hmm.
that's like a Venn diagram that should overlap resistance and resilience. But look, as people saw, to your point, that there was very little corporate accountability, they decided to turn inward to their own communities instead. And so,
Hmm.
when I'm so proud to see people that say, no, I'm not going to shop at XYZ grocery store because they folded when it came to DEI, but now I have a list of every local Black or minority or woman farmer in my area or my farmers market. And so I'm making different choices. And so the community is becoming more resilient. And so I'm wondering how you've seen that
Hmm.
community resilience come up as well. It may not be just food, it may be other things that you've seen where people have kind of turned in.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest example of resistance where communities have come together is obviously the No Kings protests that have been,
Ah,
wildly successful this year.
yes, yes.
Um, Millions of people coming out for those, and that is always heartwarming when you see these small towns in rural America or
Mhm.
red and rural America, and there's 300
Yes.
people there and they're like, we're not gonna take this because they feel that the stakes are so high. And obviously, the other thing kind of connected to that is all
Mhm.
of these groups or individuals that are following and filming ICE agents as they are
That's right.
arresting people in their
Yes.
communities, right?
Yes.
There's been significant aggression on behalf of ICE and Customs and Border Patrol back at these folks
Yeah.
who have been trying to document what they're doing. Um, so it's not without risk, right? Following ICE vehicles standing outside of detention centers. I mean, obviously, Portland, Oregon got a lot of news with the people in their unicorn and frog suits, right? Kind of
Right.
making a
Right.
parody of it, which is one, tried and tested way to resist fascism, certainly. But there
Uh-huh.
was that one guy in the frog suit where they sprayed pepper spray through the air vent of his frog suit, right?
Yes. Yes.
And then in Chicago, they pepperballed that priest or religious uh, person
Mhm.
outside of the detention center, and so that's another example of where I've seen films in airports where a person's traveling and then there are agents there like throwing some poor person to the ground and they're whipping out their phone and they're filming it, right? And they're asking where is your
Right.
warrant? What is your name? Which organization are
Exactly.
you from? So they weren't even planning on engaging, and they have. So there's that, and then you've also got the recent government shutdown
Yes. Yes. Yes.
when the government was actively trying to go through the courts to stop the court order from them having to release SNAP funds, while at the same time refusing to help with healthcare costs. I mean, it's quite gruesome, really. Oh, yeah, while also building a ballroom and having a Great Gatsby party. But
And
that's
tearing down the East Wing. Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
that's a little aside there, but you had communities knowing that food banks were under extensive strain. They were either buying people's groceries, like their friends or neighbors or employees or relatives. They were taking them to the store and buying them groceries. They were leaving groceries outside their homes. They were stocking food banks, right? There were people
That's
that
right.
had the means to try and come together. And I see that all, we talked at the beginning about rage baiting and how the
Yeah.
way that we communicate with each other has just deteriorated to such a degree that there's no common ground. And then you look at community members and community organizations stepping up for their neighbors and their friends and family members.
Mhm.
And so it's such a juxtaposition of what you see happening in real life versus if you only really engage online, you've got these two different ways of interacting with people. And so one, there is humanity, and the other, there is not, right? And then we
Mhm.
had an episode a couple of weeks ago, right, where you
Yep.
highlighted several people that were providing education online to assist folks who were having to tighten their belts and needed to find other ways to get resources or make food and stuff. And so there's these little micro communities that are springing up in addition to the millions of people who are coming out on
Yeah.
these no kings. So they're the kinds of things I've noticed, which has been very heartening to me and pulls me out from under the desk when I think all is lost.
Yeah, 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 absolutely, absolutely. Well, and we talked about the resistance scholarship that's come up. There's
Right,
been a lot of
right.
that come up where, I love how it's the resistance scholarship, like Tad Stormer's work, um,
Mm-hmm.
really kind of reminds us as Americans that, hey, just in case you were timid about resistance or fearful about resistance, let me give you or line up a reminder of all the different ways this country was formed on the backbone of resisting something, right?
Right, right.
And with that, making that very clear, putting the dots very close together when it comes to resistance history in this country, and frankly, to spark the ideas to say, hey, this is not new. This is not new, and it should not be new. But I think, Lisa, how I know for us as DEI professionals, we kind of see the both and of this is a professional concern and it's a personal concern.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but Lisa, what do you think too about that whole personal piece of this? Like, I'm listening to people like, now let me be clear. I'm sounding like my teenager, something that's cringeworthy.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard cringeworthy stuff like people who are older than myself, people of color, some LGBT folks, etc., that even they still were not clear on DEI until they realized this aha moment of how everything affected their lives in a systemic way. And that's when they started having these personal considerations of, oh, I'd never heard of it before, but I see it all around me and it's always been around me. I just didn't know it had language. I didn't know it had a field. I didn't know it had
Mm-hmm.
professionals that support that. And so I'm thinking too about how it's forced people to have their own personal journeys around this work. Um, yeah, and I know you've had your own personal journey. I have. Lisa, how many DEI professionals do we know that had to make some considerations of whether they would stay in the field or pivot out of the
Yep.
field or
Yep.
bye, I'm gone completely because I've done enough in this lifetime. I'm good with it, so I'm doing something else. How have you kind of wrestled with the personal piece of this work and even the disappointment of this work? Because it is
Yeah.
quite a bit, frankly.
I mean, 2025 has been rough, as well, it's been hard to maintain um, optimism that
Yeah.
the degree of interest in any kind of organizational review will bounce back. I mean, I don't see or I don't have much hope for the next 3 years. So it has led me and others to think about how can we pivot? What else could we do?
Hmm.
But a lot of the kind of associated areas that aren't necessarily DEI explicitly, but are looking at issues of marginalization and inequity and inequality and healthcare and
Oh
things like
yeah.
that, they've all also been impacted, right? So it's not necessarily as simple as, okay, so maybe we don't do equity audits at organizations as frequently, but maybe we do these other things. But these other things
Yeah.
have also been impacted. So I
Right. That's
think
right.
I want to pull on a thread of a comment you made earlier in this podcast recording around that we knew it could be bad, right? It wasn't that we didn't come into this year clear-eyed, but even the most pessimistic of people
Uh-huh.
around how bad it can be, I think, have been surprised at just how
Oh.
base and egregious
Oh
things
yeah.
have become, right? And how, I mean, we are recording on the heels of a explicitly racist diatribe by the President of the United States in a cabinet meeting that he was also sleeping on and off throughout, right? And so
Mhm.
the degree to which people are emboldened, and it's not that racism is better under the covers, and I'm not saying that racism was never there before, right? But
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
are in such a time where now it is okay to be explicitly racist, um, and there is zero backlash. Like, if you remember back in the first term, he said something to the about shithole countries, right, in reference to
Yes.
immigration. And people distanced themselves from that, right? I mean, it didn't ultimately hurt him in any big way, but people were like, no, I don't agree. This isn't acceptable, blah, 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 right? Crickets this time, crickets. And it was a much more explicit and publicized diatribe. So I have to think about from my own personal journey around, so what does it mean to operate in a culture where the stakes have completely changed, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Where cruelty, narcissism, violence, hatred are given a platform in ways that they never have been before, right? Like it feels like a much harder divide. And
Mm,
that's, it's not new, right? I understand it's not new
yeah.
because there are periods in US history where it has been this way and we have come out of them, you know.
Mhm.
But as a white person, certainly I think about it. As a person who wasn't born here, I think about it. We've continued
Mhm.
with this podcast, but I would be lying if I didn't say that it makes me a little bit nervous doing this podcast, given that I'm a
Mhm.
naturalized citizen and
Yeah.
not born here.
Hmm.
So yeah, so it's complex, Shauna. I don't have a great answer for you, but it's something that, you and I have talked about, and I have certainly been thinking about in depth for many, many months. How about you?
Yeah, I think the personal piece of it is uh, I've shared this multiple times on this podcast and I'll keep saying it. I'm I'm nested, if you will. I
Hmm.
am a Black person in a historically predominantly Black county with a Black mayor, Black representation within House and Senate, a Black governor, a Black airport, y'all. I mean, for real. Like I got blackety black everything here in Maryland and very, very blue. And even with all of that nesting that
Hmm.
should make you feel better about certain things, it's never going to relieve you of all dis-ease when it comes to this because we
Right.
are so
Right.
close to DC. We are
Yep.
so close to Baltimore. We know, we have seen the track record of how many times 45, 47 has specifically targeted Black mayors of cities.
Yep.
We've seen it happen before. He has targeted the wonderful Governor Wes Moore, who is only the third Black governor in this country that leads the great state of Maryland, who is also a veteran. And so, given that, I constantly remind myself when natural fears or concerns happen, especially around my children, especially around my parents and grandparents that are in Southern Virginia in very red areas of the country. I still feel that dis-ease because, again, all bets are off now. All bets
Right.
are off. And so, with that, being aware and knowing how um, folks that do the type of work that we do have been specifically targeted. And so, I remember, Lisa, this was last year. And I'll be completely transparent. Lisa has helped me out tremendously when it comes to my web presence and all kinds of other things that we've talked through and worked through. And she did all this really hard work on technical stuff that I cannot do. And one of the things that I thought about, even as we were walking through that process of website and outward facing stuff, is making sure the slate is wiped very clean so you don't
Mm,
have outward facing addresses. You don't have outward facing, like, yes, people know that I post about my children all the time, but guess what? I bet you don't know what schools they go to. I bet you they
right.
don't know, like, they're just certain precautionary things. Um, because we know that things get very interesting when there is a bit of lawlessness going on and flagrant lawlessness at that.
Hmm.
Um, Knowing that you're a threat. And so, given that, I just try to be very aware of my surroundings. There are certain things that I never do alone. There are certain things that I used to do all the time that I don't do anymore. I do in a modified way. Lisa, I remember telling you the story about January 6th, where African American cyclists were
Yep.
forewarned the
Yep.
day before, hey, I know you normally do this ride through DC. We're encouraging you to not do it. And in fact, our organized ride is going to be canceled. You can do what you want to do independently, but we're not doing this from an organized fashion. Um, those are things that you have to think about on a regular basis. You have to think about on a regular basis. And the fact that I'm grateful, especially when it comes to school district. I remember in spring, so both of my boys were rising up to a new school at the same time. So a rising up
Hmm.
ceremony from middle to high, rising up from elementary to middle. Lisa, I could have just sat there and wept reading the preliminary emails to let parents know to be at ease as best as they could because ICE would not be allowed into the schools or on the property
Hmm.
if they should show up so that people could at least celebrate their kid rising up. Now,
Yeah.
I don't have to think about that because my children are Black. However, for the other melanated children and families that would have been targeted had such a thing happened, I weep with anger because it pisses me off that
Yeah.
such
Yeah.
joyous time can't be because folks are looking over their shoulder. That pisses me off. Personally, that pisses me off. Um, in addition to churches, that's another place as well, Lisa. A
Hmm.
lot of y'all know too that I've been part of the Trinity New York City Wall Street Fellowship. It's a 2-year fellowship, and getting to listen to in a random conversation the folks that are responsible for social media for the church's activities and how their numbers have ramped up so much. And they were at first very excited that their social media numbers had ramped up on YouTube and other places, only to realize that the majority of melanated folks in New York City, the majority of melanated folks that were making a decision that they did not feel comfortable coming into the edifice of the church, but instead were logging in for their own worship service,
Mm.
also makes me weep at the very same time. That you
Yeah.
can't. And now, Black folks understand not being able to go to a place of worship peacefully. This now, to me, it's far out of hand. And it just grieves me personally to even think that people have to look over their shoulder that way. It sucks. Sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, living in terror of what your government may or not do, what rights
Yes,
they may
yes.
or may not allow, right, is an enduring multi-generational experience for Black people in the United States, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
the personal journey for myself and a lot of people is understanding that the degree, like I'm not saying I feel terrified, but the low hum of dis-ease, to use your word, all the way through to other people who are not leaving their house because they're terrified. The
Hmm.
window that has given a significant portion of the population into the ever-present, ongoing, everyday experience of Black people here, I think has also been pretty transformative.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't mean to sound, this is a bit cliche, I guess, because this poem has been used a lot, and I think I've even mentioned it on the pod before. But I'm that the poem in Germany about they came for this person and I didn't say anything. They came for this group, I didn't say anything. They came for this person, blah blah blah,
Yes.
and then they
Hmm.
came for me, and there was nothing left. I think for a lot of people, a lot of groups, a lot of identity groups, which is likely, something that the Black community has known, forever. There's pennies that are dropping now related
Right. That's right.
to vulnerability that have been easily ignored before because of privilege associated with whatever that identity is, whether that's male, whether that's white, whether that's able-bodied, right? And
Yep.
that feels very chilling and different, right? Even though for you, it might just feel like this is how it's always felt, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's right. It's I hate to make the statement of welcome to our world, but
Right.
it does kind of feel that way. It's like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Here we are. You thought you were exempt, but you're not.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
and as much as, the it sounds flippant, but I truly don't mean it to be that way. I truly hate to be right on some of these issues.
Hmm.
They came for us, so now they're coming for you. I tried to tell you, you didn't want to hear it. I did not want to be right. I wanted to be as wrong could be, and we weren't. And here we are. And so, given that, I think that brings us to kind of like the last thoughts I guess we should have in 2025 is maybe kind of a amalgamation of what's that thing of concern that we should keep top of mind, but also maybe that thing, what is it, Lisa? What's that saying? Decide which wolf you're going to feed, the good wolf or the bad wolf, or the positive or the
Oh,
negative.
I don't know, but that sounds
It's
great.
it's some quote to that effect, but I'm thinking about that too. It's like I don't want to sound Pollyanna-ish, like, oh, there's nothing to be worried about. Of course, there's something to be concerned about, but there also may be things that we want to continue to lift up, that either sustain us or break through all this foolishness. And for me, it's the resistance piece. I am so
Mm.
frustrated that Tad Stormer's book on resistance history in the US doesn't even come out until June. But I've been like stalking this man on Instagram and Substack, reading everything that he's writing, kind of as the on ramp to that, because I feel like it's such a playbook
Mm.
for, micro or macro action. And so for me, it's like, oh, the threat is resistance, but yet resistance also might be the answer. And so I'm wondering what you're thinking about as far as things to be concerned about, but also maybe things we need to lift up.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest concerns are misuse of the military in American
Oh,
cities and the associated
yes.
likelihood that this will interfere with the elections in November 2026, and that it's
Hmm.
all calculated and it's all planned. That is my biggest
Hmm.
concern, and some of you might find that hyperbolic, but there are many people who are academics and who have worked in government for a long time and who have worked in the military who I listen to or read who share similar fears. And so then to counter that, to kind of pile on with what you're saying, is that resistance piece is going to be really important. And I think that we are going to be called as a community to take some risks that we might otherwise not have been willing to take, right? Because
Ooh, yeah,
putting your
you're
body on the line, stepping up in ways that might feel uncomfortable but are necessary. And I do think, again, not meaning to sound Pollyanna-ish, but I do think there are enough people for whom a line will get crossed, and many are not there yet, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But there's that middle group of people who are uncomfortable, but it hasn't affected them yet, or they haven't quite gotten to that place. But I think we have time in 2026,
Yeah,
sadly,
yeah,
that I wanna, this is my little flame, right? This is my little pilot light that doesn't go out, and it might be
yeah.
naive, but I have to believe that there will be enough people and the tide will turn. But I don't think I think it is naive to think that
Mhm.
without the current president, this will all go away.
Mm,
This sentiment and trajectory existed before him and it will exist after him. And so it isn't just going to be one No Kings March. It isn't going to be one school board meeting that you attend around book burning, right? This is going to be an ongoing fight that will extend beyond this particular individual's tenure in the White House. And I want to be hopeful that people have the energy to do that.
mhm, mhm, mhm. Well, I'm with you on that. I think the how can I say, the on ramp was long, and the off ramp is probably going to be longer when it comes to
Mm,
this. And just being aware of that. So people who are educating us, like Tad Starmer and Karen Atia, formerly of the Washington Post, that's launched her own resistance school, all those folks are going to be the clarion voices of what direction to go in.
yeah.
Because to your point, you're bringing up a great point that 45, 47 wasn't out of character, wasn't off his normal trajectory. It was just that what was already coming to pass got accelerated, got louder, got
Mm,
bigger. But we were already headed in that direction. And
hmm
even as I sat back, even before the official election results came in November of 2024, as I was thinking about who would be the right person to course correct the ship once he's out of office, I was like, one person can't be that savior. I'm telling you that right now. I
Yeah.
don't care who it is. As much as I just bow down to the Kamalas of the world, she's not going to be able to do that thing if she did choose to run, much less anyone else that I can think of top of mind that would run. It will need to be that collective
It
effort
will.
turning point. And so, to your point, I think the biggest threat, in my opinion, is what we've already been threatened by and succumbed to, which is complacency.
Yeah. Great point.
Um, to me, that's the biggest threat. And so the counterpoint to our biggest solution is active resistance.
Mm,
Active resistance.
hmm
Stubborn, stubborn, stubborn. I think that can be both the threat and the answer. So.
Yeah.
So keep
Great.
resisting, y'all. That's my point. Keep resisting. We're going into this time of the year where it's kind of that holiday time, Lisa, or at least the downtime where people are not like checking their email religiously and doing the work. Um, I'm encouraging folks, Lisa, to reflect on this podcast,
hmm
reflect on all the episodes that we shared this year, and start making some personal decisions on where you want to go next year. Are you going to be that
Yep.
person driving people to the polls? Or you're going to be that person that is kind of over educating new voters on what's going on.
hmm
What's going to be your mark on the world? It doesn't have to be a macro action, it can be a micro action, but there is something to be done. Um,
hmm
Kind of like that No Kings March, Lisa, that I told you about, where there were some protesters that I ran into while I was in Philadelphia that very same weekend. And what made it funny yet not funny was many of them said, "Oh, this is not our first rodeo, nor will it be our last." And these were, white older people that said, "Oh, no, 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 no. We've been attempting to stand on the right side of history for decades now, and we will continue to do so." That's my hope for other people too. Yep.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
with that, that's the last one until January of 2026. It's
Yep. Yep.
six. Let's say it's six. But while we're gone, y'all know what to do. Go back, listen to the archives, listen to podcasts from this year. I have a few favorites of my own. We have the 200th episode
hmm
that was also this year as well. So go back, listen to some stuff while we're gone. Also, you can reach us on any social media platform, our podcast apps, any of your favorite podcast apps, or email us at info@unfazedpodcast.com. Go to our website, unfazedpodcast.com, to see everything all in one place and space. And look, if you liked this year's episodes, make sure you go back, listen to them again, like, subscribe, leave a review, send them out to your people, right? Friends, coworkers, or others in this phase of your life. But we'll see you next year.
Yeah. See you next year, everyone.